If that dog's still there tomorrow, I'm calling the county." That was the first thing I said out loud as I stepped onto my porch and saw the scruffy golden retriever sitting on old Mrs. Daly's front step again. Third morning in a row. Same spot. Same look in his eyes. Like he was waiting for someone who forgot he existed. I hadn't meant to sound so harsh. Truth was, I wasn't a dog person, never had been. My ex-wife loved dogs, which might explain a few things, now that I think about it. But this dog, well, he was different. Quiet. Not the barky type. He just sat there like a statue with a heart, eyes tracking every car, every person, never moving from that spot unless someone tried to get close. Mrs. Daly had passed away 3 months ago. Stroke. No family. No visitors at the funeral except me and the mailman. Her place had been empty ever since. I'd mowed the lawn once to keep the HOA from leaving another note. That was about the extent of my involvement. But this dog? He showed up out of nowhere 3 days ago and just parked himself there. Didn't chase squirrels, didn't sniff around the trash, didn't bark at the neighbor kids. Just sat. Morning to night. In the rain, too. I watched from behind my blinds while he got soaked 2 nights ago. Just curled up on the welcome mat and waited. On that third morning, I couldn't take it anymore. Maybe it was the way he looked at me when I came out to grab the paper. Not a look of hunger, not even sadness. More like he expected me to explain something he didn't understand. So I walked over. He didn't move, didn't flinch. Just looked up, tail thumping once. I crouched down a few feet away. "Hey, buddy, what's your deal?" He tilted his head. "You lost?" Still nothing. Just that quiet, patient look. There was no collar. His coat was dirty, but underneath the muck he was healthy. No ribs showing. Someone had cared for him not long ago. "All right," I muttered. "Let's see what animal control has to say." But as I turned back toward my house, I heard something behind me. I turned. The dog had stood up and was now walking slowly toward me, head low, like he was apologizing. I didn't move. Neither did he, after a few steps, then he sat. I don't know why, but I sighed. "Fine. You can hang out for a bit. But if you make a mess in my yard, it's over." He followed me across the street, but didn't step onto my porch, just curled up in the corner of my lawn, where the sun hit strongest. That was the start. The next morning he was in the same spot. I left a bowl of water. He sniffed it, drank, and wagged his tail once. Still didn't bark. Still didn't try to come closer than a few feet. I went to work. I work at a hardware store over in Oak Ridge, about 15 minutes away. Easy hours. I mentioned the dog to Charlie, the owner, when I got in. "Golden retriever, huh? Those are loyal as all get out," he said, pulling boxes down from a shelf. "Maybe he belonged to the old lady." "She never had a dog. Not in the years I've lived there." Charlie shrugged. "Maybe he's waiting for someone who used to live there. Dogs remember places, you know." I thought about that the whole drive home. When I pulled into my driveway, he lifted his head from the grass and looked at me like I'd been gone a year. I got out, walked over, and this time, he met me halfway. Let me touch his head. That was the first time. I didn't tell anyone this, but I sat on the porch with him for almost an hour that night, drinking iced tea and watching the sky go dark. No leash, no collar, just a dog who decided I was okay company. I figured someone must be missing him, so I posted a photo on the neighborhood board and on a few local Facebook groups. Got a couple likes, a few shares, but no hits. One lady messaged me asking if I was giving him up for adoption. I said no. I wasn't sure why. A week went by. Then 2. Still no word. I started calling him Buddy. Unoriginal, I know, but it fit. Buddy started sleeping in my yard every night. I left out food, and he started eating. I bought a brush from the store and started cleaning his coat every evening. He didn't mind, even seemed to enjoy it. He still wouldn't go inside the house, though. No matter how wide I left the door, he'd just look, sniff, then turn back to his spot. Then one day, something changed. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. I was weeding the front garden when I heard Buddy bark, loud, short, urgent. He never barked before. I dropped the trowel and turned. Buddy was at Mrs. Daly's doorstep, barking, tail rigid, eyes on the door like it had just opened, but it hadn't. I crossed the street. "What's going on, boy?" He stopped barking, looked up at me, then back at the door. He pawed at it. It took me a second to realize. He thought someone was inside. I rang the doorbell. Nothing. Knocked. Nothing. I had the spare key. After she passed, I'd taken it from the little box on her porch in case someone needed access. The place had been cleaned out by some estate service, but otherwise untouched. I unlocked the door and opened it slowly. Dust. Silence. Buddy didn't try to go in, just stood there, tail low, ears forward. I stepped inside. Still nothing. Then I noticed it, on the far wall of the living room, a small photo taped above the fireplace. Must have fallen and been put back by someone, maybe the cleaners. But it wasn't a picture of Mrs. Daly. It was a boy, maybe 12, sitting in the grass with a golden retriever beside him. I stared. The dog in the photo had the same face, the same eyes. I stepped back outside, holding the photo. "That you?" I asked. Buddy whined. So maybe he wasn't waiting for Mrs. Daly. Maybe he was waiting for the boy. That changed things. I started asking around. No one remembered Mrs. Daly having a grandson, but records showed the house had been sold once before, to a couple with a kid, way back in the 90s. Before my time. I dug deeper. Town hall records, old newspapers, finally found a blurb about a family who lived on Maple Street. Same address. Moved away suddenly. No details. Just gone. I posted the photo online, asked if anyone remembered the boy. Got a name? Jason Halpern. Tracked down a high school yearbook. Then a graduation announcement. Turns out Jason moved to Oregon in 2001. I found an address. I called. Left a message. Didn't expect anything. But the next day, I got a call back. "Hi, this is Jason. You left a message about a dog?" My heart skipped. "Yeah, I think he used to be yours." Silence. "I had a retriever when I was a kid," he said finally. "We had to give him up when we moved. His name was Scout." "He's here," I said, "and he's been waiting." Jason didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, "That's not possible. He'd be almost 30. I looked at Buddy. "Then maybe it's not Scout, but he sure seems to think he belongs here." Jason came out a week later. I watched from the porch as he stepped onto the lawn. Buddy was across the street, sitting in the exact spot on Mrs. Daly's step. Jason stopped. Stared. "Scout?" he said, barely audible. Buddy stood up, walked forward, tail wagging slowly, like he was waiting for permission. Jason crouched. "No way." Buddy reached him, pressed his head into Jason's chest. Jason didn't say anything, just wrapped his arms around him and cried. I didn't interrupt, just watched. Later, I learned Scout had been left at a shelter when they moved. Jason never forgave his parents, said he thought about that dog every day, and somehow one just like him found his way back. Or maybe it really was him. Stranger things have happened. Jason stayed in town a few days, took Buddy to the vet. Turns out he was maybe 10, 11 at most. Healthy. Microchipped, but no info attached. It was like he'd just appeared. Jason couldn't take him. His job kept him traveling. But he came to my house that last night with a leash, some toys, and a thank you. "I think he chose you," Jason said. Buddy was on my porch again, chewing on one of the new toys. He looked up at us and wagged his tail. I nodded. "Yeah, I think he did." And that's how a dog I didn't ask for became the best part of my life. But that wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. The first time I let Buddy in the house, he didn't even hesitate. He just trotted in like he'd been waiting for me to open that door for weeks. No sniffing around, no pacing. He walked straight to the living room rug, turned twice, and flopped down like he owned the place. I stood there for a second, holding the door like I'd just invited a ghost into my home. It's not like I'd never had a dog in my house before. My sister's mutt used to stay with me when she went on vacation. But this was different. Buddy wasn't a guest. He wasn't temporary. He was mine, I guess. Or maybe I was his. Either way, he was in. The next few days were oddly easy. He didn't chew anything, didn't bark, didn't even jump on the furniture unless I invited him. He'd wake up when I did, stretch, shake his coat out, and follow me around while I made coffee like he was inspecting the place for morning updates. And when I went to work, he didn't fuss. Just walked with me to the porch, watched me get in the truck, and curled up near the steps like he'd be right there when I got back. And he always was. The neighborhood started to notice. Old Man Harris from 2 doors down gave me a thumbs up one morning. "That your new shadow?" "Guess so," I called back. Even the mailman, Frank, a grizzled guy who'd walked the route longer than I'd lived there, started bringing treats. Buddy never barked at him, just wagged his tail like they'd been friends for years. "You lucked out," Frank said one day, handing me a package and tossing a biscuit to Buddy. "That one's got good eyes. Seen a lot of dogs. Not all of them look at you like they know your soul." I chuckled, but I didn't disagree. Some nights I found myself talking to Buddy like he was a roommate. I'd come home, drop my keys, and say stuff like, "They raised the price on lawn bags again," or, "You'd think Greg would stop microwaving fish in the break room." Buddy would just look at me, tail sweeping the floor, eyes patient, like he understood. Maybe he did. But as settled as things felt, something started gnawing at me. He still went to Mrs. Daly's doorstep. Not every day, but often enough. Sometimes in the morning before I was up, sometimes right after dinner. He'd stand there, tail down, head tilted toward the door, like he was waiting for it to open again. It bothered me. One evening, I walked over and sat beside him on the steps. "You still think someone's coming back?" I asked. He didn't answer, obviously, just leaned his shoulder against my leg and sighed. That night, I went back through the old documents I'd saved from the county records office. Something was itching at the back of my brain. Mrs. Daly hadn't owned the house originally. She'd inherited it in 2003, according to the transfer record. Before that, it had been listed under the name Mark and Elaine Halpern, Jason's parents. I stared at the names, then at the year. Buddy wasn't Scout. He couldn't be. The math didn't add up, but he acted like he knew the place. And the photo. I pulled it out of the drawer. The dog in the picture had a little spot above one eye. Buddy didn't. But the eyes, there was something about the eyes. I set it down, rubbed my face. "You're driving me nuts, you know that?" I muttered. Buddy, now sprawled at my feet, opened one eye and blinked slowly. I decided to talk to Jason again. Maybe he knew more. Maybe there was another connection. He picked up after 2 rings. "Hey, it's Jason." "Hey, it's me. Listen, I've been digging through some stuff, and You sure there's no way that dog could be Scout? Jason chuckled. Still thinking about that, huh? I can't help it. He keeps going back to your old house, like he's waiting. I mean, we only lived there for a couple years. We moved when I was 13. Scout was 6 when we left him. That'd make him nearly 30 now. Yeah, I know it doesn't make sense. Jason paused. But I swear he acts like he remembers, like he's been trying to come back. Another pause. My mom used to say dogs carry pieces of people with them, Jason said quietly. Maybe he picked up something from Scout, I don't know. But whatever's going on, I'm glad you found him. Or he found you. Yeah, me too. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. The envelope had my name, but it was the name on the back that froze me. E. Halpern. I opened it carefully. The letter was short. Neat cursive. To the man who took in a wandering friend, thank you for caring for him. He was never meant to be alone. We all make decisions we regret, and sometimes life gives us a second chance through someone else. That dog means more than I can explain. I'm sorry I can't come in person. Please know you've made a difference. E.H. I read it 3 times. Elaine Halpern was supposed to have passed away a decade ago, according to a town registry. Cancer. But maybe the records were wrong. Or maybe someone was keeping her memory alive. Either way, someone out there knew Buddy, or Scout, or whoever he was. I kept the letter in the same drawer as the photo. That weekend, Buddy started doing something new. He began walking with me. I'd always just let him out in the yard or taken him on short leash walks around the block. But that Saturday morning, when I grabbed my keys and stepped outside, he was waiting by the truck. "Want a ride?" I joked. He barked once. First time since the door incident, so I opened the door. He jumped in like he'd done it 100 times. We drove to the park on the edge of town. Big, grassy place with a walking trail and a pond. I let him off leash. Wasn't supposed to, but no one was around. He didn't run wild, just stayed close, trotting beside me, sniffing the air. We passed an older couple on a bench. The woman smiled. "He's beautiful. What's his name?" "Buddy," I said. He kind of named himself. "Seems loyal." "Yeah," I said, watching him chase a butterfly. "He really is." After that, we made it a routine. Every weekend, we'd explore a new park or trail. Sometimes I'd bring a sandwich. He'd get half, always. I started seeing changes in myself too. I'd wake up earlier, felt less tired, ate better, even started fixing things around the house I'd put off for years. It was like Buddy reminded me there was still life worth living, even after all the quiet, after the divorce, after the years of nothing. One rainy Thursday, I came home late. Thunder was rumbling, and the driveway was slick with puddles. I rushed to the porch, expecting Buddy to be curled up in his usual spot. But he wasn't there. I panicked, called his name, checked the yard. Nothing. I ran across the street. Maybe he'd gone back to Mrs. Daly's. The front door was open. I froze. There were no lights, just the creak of old wood and the sound of rain. "Buddy?" I called. A shuffle. Then, from the shadows, he emerged, wagging his tail. But behind him, a figure. I stepped back. "Who's there?" A flashlight clicked on. "Easy," a voice said. "I'm not here to cause trouble." A man stepped forward. Middle-aged, balding, thin frame. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm Dean," he said. "I used to live here, a long time ago." I didn't lower my guard. "That house has been empty for months." "I know. I was driving through. Wanted to see it one more time." Then I saw the dog. I looked down at Buddy. He was sitting calmly between us. That your dog? Dean shook his head. No, but he looked at me like he knew me. I followed him inside. I wasn't sure what to say. You said you used to live here? Dean nodded. Back in '85. My mom sold the place after my sister died. I left for college. Never came back until now. We stood in silence. Buddy nudged my leg, then walked to Dean and sat beside him. Dean looked down, eyes misty. We had a retriever when I was a kid, named Max, spitting image of this one. He reached down, ran a hand over Buddy's back. He used to sleep right here, on this floor. I looked around the empty house. The smell of dust and rain filled the air. Maybe Buddy's more than we thought, I said. Dean nodded slowly. Maybe he remembers what we forget. I let Dean sit with Buddy for a while. Then we locked up and left. I didn't see Dean again, but something told me that moment mattered. Back home, Buddy curled up on the rug, content. I sat beside him, hand resting on his side. I still didn't know where he came from, but I was starting to understand why he stayed. The following morning, I found Buddy sitting at the foot of the stairs, staring at the front door like it had whispered something to him during the night. His ears were up, but relaxed. His tail didn't wag, but it wasn't stiff either. He looked alert, waiting, like he was tuned into something I couldn't hear. I poured my coffee and leaned against the kitchen counter, watching him. The sunlight streamed through the front window, laying golden patches on the hardwood floor. Buddy didn't budge. Expecting company? I asked, not really expecting an answer. After a few minutes, I whistled softly, and he finally turned his head toward me. He got up, stretched with a groan, and walked over to sit by my feet. I scratched behind his ears. You're a mystery, you know that? I decided to take the day off. Charlie didn't ask questions when I called, just said, "Give that dog a good walk for me," and hung up. So we drove out to the edge of county, where the trails ran quieter and the cell reception dropped off. I packed a lunch, and Buddy jumped into the truck like he'd been waiting all week. The air was crisp, not cold, but enough to keep the bugs away. The trail was soft underfoot, blanketed with pine needles and the scent of old trees. Buddy trotted beside me, ears perked, every now and then stopping to sniff at a bush or investigate a rustle in the leaves. We made it to a clearing with a small stream running through it. I sat on a fallen log and pulled out a sandwich. Buddy waited patiently until I handed him his half. "You're spoiled," I told him. He wagged his tail once and rested his chin on my knee. We stayed there for an hour. Didn't say much, obviously, but the silence between us felt full, like a kind of understanding. I never really bought into all that dogs sense your emotions talk before, but with Buddy, it was different. He didn't just sense my emotions. He responded to them, matched them. On the drive back, he sat up in the passenger seat, staring out the window like a co-pilot. At one point, he looked over at me and made a soft sound, somewhere between a sigh and a low woof. "What?" I said, glancing at him. "You remember this road?" He let out a tiny huff, then looked back out the window. When we pulled into the neighborhood, he didn't wait for the truck to stop before standing up, tail slowly wagging. I parked, and before I could open my door, he was already out and trotting across the street. Mrs. Daly's doorstep. Again. This time, he didn't sit. He paced, looked at the windows, then turned back to me, gave a short bark, and pawed at the door. "Buddy?" I walked over. "What is it now?" He stared at the door, then back at me, and barked again. I unlocked it and opened it. All right, let's see. The air inside was still. Dust had settled more deeply into the corners, and a couple of cobwebs had taken over the upper windows. I'd meant to come clean it out weeks ago, but life had gotten in the way. Buddy stepped in slowly, carefully. He sniffed the floor, the walls, the hallway. Then he stopped at the back door, where the kitchen opened out onto the small garden. He scratched it. Once, twice. I opened it. The yard was overgrown. Vines had crept over the fence. The grass was patchy and yellow, but Buddy walked straight to a pile of broken flower pots and dirt, sniffed the area, and sat down. I stood behind him. Something buried there? He didn't move, just sat, staring. I grabbed an old trowel from the kitchen drawer and started digging where he'd placed himself. The soil came up dry, clumpy, hard-packed. A few inches down, I hit something solid. I cleared it off. It was a small wooden box, rotted on the edges, lid half splintered. I looked at Buddy. You're kidding. He just stared. I pulled the box out and set it on the grass, carefully pried it open. Inside was a bundle of old photos, yellowed with time, wrapped in a handkerchief. Beneath them, a faded leather collar with a rusted tag. I held it up. The tag read, Scout. Buddy whined. I looked through the photos. Jason, younger, smiling. The same dog, Scout, by his side in almost every one. One photo had Mrs. Daly in it, younger, holding a pie with Jason and Scout seated in front of her. So there had been a connection. Jason must have stayed here with her at some point. Maybe during a summer. Maybe after the move. I took the box back with me, wiped it down, and set it on the mantel at my place. Buddy sat at my feet as I arranged the photos. You led me to it, I said. How'd you know? He didn't answer, just sighed and rested his head on my foot. The next few weeks passed quietly. Buddy kept close. Our walks grew longer. People around the neighborhood started asking about him more. A few kids even asked if they could pet him when we passed by. Buddy never barked. He'd just wag his tail and stand still. One afternoon, I was standing in my driveway chatting with Frank the mailman when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. It was an old sedan, a little beat up but clean. A woman stepped out, mid-60s, thin, dressed in dark jeans and a tan jacket. Her hair was silver, pulled back in a low ponytail. She looked around, then locked eyes with me. I'm looking for a man named... She paused, checking a piece of paper. Grant Holland? That's me, I said slowly. Buddy trotted up beside me. The woman's eyes widened. She took a step forward. That's him. That's Scout. Wait, I said, stepping in front of Buddy. Who are you? My name is Ellen Wright, she said. I used to live here, on this street, years ago. That dog, we raised him, my husband and I, before we moved, before everything fell apart. I didn't know what to say. Buddy moved forward, slowly, and sniffed her outstretched hand. Then he sat, leaned against her leg. Her eyes filled with tears. Oh my God, I thought he was gone. I gave her a minute. When she'd collected herself, I invited her inside. She sat at the kitchen table, fingers curled around a mug of tea. I was married to Mark Halpern, she said. Jason's father. We had Scout before Jason was born. He was our first baby, in a way. Moved into that house when we were just starting out. What happened? I asked. We divorced. Mark got the house. I moved to Oregon. Jason stayed with his dad for a while, then came to live with me. When Mark passed, I didn't come back. Too many memories. She looked at Buddy. I always wondered what happened to Scout. I told her what I knew. About the doorstep, about the collar, about the photos. I don't understand, she said softly. It can't be the same dog. It just can't. I nodded. I know. But it feels like it is. She stayed a little longer, talked to Buddy like he was an old friend. Before she left, she kissed the top of his head. Thank you, she told me, for taking care of him. Whatever part of Scout is in there, you've brought it peace. After she left, I sat on the porch with Buddy. The sky was streaked with orange and purple. You've got more history than I do, I said. He leaned against my leg. That night, I took out the box again, added the new photos Ellen had given me. One showed Scout as a puppy, being cradled by a younger Mark. Another had Ellen, Mark, Jason, and Scout on a picnic blanket in the backyard I could see from my window. A full life. Lost. Then found again. The next morning, Buddy didn't go to Mrs. Daly's doorstep. He stayed by me. We spent the day running errands, went to the feed store, the park, got burgers from the little shack by the lake. I bought him one of his own. No onions. He ate it like it was a gift. We sat by the water, watching the ripples. A couple walked by, smiled, and said, "That dog looks happy." I looked down at him. "He is," I said. "Finally." But something told me his journey wasn't quite over. Not yet. The first real snow of the season came early that year. It started as a flurry during breakfast, just a dusting on the lawn, and by lunchtime, the street had turned into a soft white corridor, hushed and glowing under a gray sky. I stood at the window, sipping coffee, watching the world slow down. Buddy was at the door before I even grabbed my coat. He loved the cold, and the snow only made him livelier. He bounded through the powder like a pup, rolling, leaping, then running back to me with his tongue out and ears flopping. We walked down the sidewalk in the tracks left by someone's morning run. My boots crunched quietly while Buddy danced beside me, stopping every now and then to nose the snow-covered bushes like they were hiding secrets. We passed old Harris, shoveling his driveway. "Dog's got more energy than I do," he called, leaning on his shovel. "He could probably do your whole driveway in 10 minutes if he had thumbs," I joked. Buddy barked once, as if to agree, then trotted ahead. I caught up as he veered toward Mrs. Daly's house again. But this time, he didn't go to the doorstep. He circled the mailbox, sniffed the base, then trotted into the backyard like he had somewhere to be. I followed, a little slower. The garden looked different under snow. Softer. Quieter. The spot where we'd found the box was just a mound now. Buddy didn't stop there. He went all the way to the back fence and stood, staring through the slats. I stepped up beside him and looked out. Beyond the fence was an old walking path that curved toward the woods. I'd never paid much attention to it before, thought it was just a shortcut kids used to cut through to the creek. Buddy barked once, then looked at me. "You want to go?" He wagged his tail. I hesitated. The snow was picking up, and I wasn't sure how deep it would get. But something about the way he looked down that path, I couldn't ignore it. We went back to my house. I threw on a thicker coat, packed some water and snacks in my backpack, and we returned to the trail. The snow muffled everything. Our footsteps were the only sound, and even they faded as we got deeper. Buddy led the way, always a few steps ahead, stopping to make sure I was following. The trail wound through the woods, then opened up into a clearing I didn't know existed. There was an old bench there, half buried in snow, and a faded wooden sign that read, "Halpern Grove." I stared at it. "Halpern," I said out loud. Buddy walked to the base of the bench and sat. I brushed snow off the seat, revealing a small plaque. In loving memory of Scout, forever waiting, forever loved. My breath caught. Buddy looked up at me, tail brushing the snow. I sat down beside him. They made this for him? There were flowers beneath the snow. Someone had been here before. Recently. Fresh ones. A small toy ball sat next to the plaque, half frozen. I picked it up. It squeaked weakly when I pressed it. I looked around. The trees swayed gently above, heavy with snow. The sky pressing in, but not menacing. Just present. Was this where you used to come? I asked. Buddy nosed the ball, then rested his head on my knee. We sat there for a long while. I didn't say anything more. Just watched the snow fall around us. Back home, I wrote Jason another letter. Told him about the grove, the plaque, the flowers. Asked if he or his mom had ever been there recently. He called the next evening. I didn't even know that existed, he said. That bench, the plaque. We never set that up. Then who did? No idea, he said. Maybe someone who knew him. Maybe Mrs. Daly. She's been gone a while. Jason paused. Maybe it was a neighbor. I remember our old babysitter used to take us out to that trail. Maybe she did it. It was possible. But the toy ball looked new. The flowers weren't more than a week old. Buddy curled up beside the fireplace while I stared out the window at the snow, wondering. A few days later, I had my answer. I was returning from the store, salt bags in the truck bed, when I saw a woman placing something by the bench at the Grove. I only caught a glimpse as I turned the corner, but it was enough. I parked, grabbed Buddy's leash, and we headed toward the trail. It took 10 minutes to reach the clearing. The woman was still there, brushing snow off the seat, placing a small tin down next to the ball. She turned when she heard us. "Oh," she said. "Hello." She was maybe in her 70s. Bright blue eyes, long coat, knit scarf. Her hair was snow white, pulled back in a low braid. "That your dog?" she asked, nodding at Buddy. "Yeah," I said. "We come here sometimes." She smiled gently. "Beautiful place, isn't it?" "It is. You put the plaque here?" Her smile softened, and she looked down. "Yes, years ago." "You knew Scout?" "I did," she said. "I used to walk dogs for the neighbors when I was younger. Scout was my favorite. He'd come with me even when I didn't have a leash. We'd sit right here after school. He loved this place." Buddy stepped forward and nudged her hand. Her eyes widened slightly. "Well, I'll be..." She crouched and touched his head. "You look just like him." I told her what I knew, about how Buddy appeared, the doorstep, the collar, the photos, Ellen, Jason. She listened quietly, her hand never leaving Buddy's fur. "I always wondered what happened to him," she said finally. "He was more than a pet. He was comfort." She stood slowly. This bench was for me as much as for him. I come here to remember simpler days. We walked back to the street together. She introduced herself as Carol. "I live down near the bend, still in the same house," she said. "I saw your dog on the porch a few weeks back. Thought it was my mind playing tricks on me." "It's not just you," I said. "Everyone says he looks like Scout." She smiled. Maybe he's what Scout would have been if he got to stay. We parted ways, but she promised to stop by sometime with a photo album. Buddy seemed lighter after that. He still had his quiet moments, his long stares into the distance. But he ran more, barked more, played more. he started doing something else, too. Every morning, after I fed him, he'd bring a toy to the door. A ball, a plush squirrel, once even my slipper. He'd set it down, sit beside it, and look at me like he was offering a gift. I started setting the toys on a shelf near the door. After a while, the shelf was full. I didn't move them. Felt like it mattered. The neighbors noticed, of course. One kid from up the street came by one afternoon, knocked, and asked, "Can your dog come play with mine?" Buddy looked at me. I shrugged. "Sure." The two of them ran around the yard for an hour. Buddy never got rough. Just let the little terrier jump on him, nip his ears, chase him in circles. Afterward, the boy's mom thanked me. "He hasn't smiled like that in weeks," she said. "Lost his grandpa a month ago. They used to walk here every afternoon." I looked at Buddy, sitting patiently with the boy's hand on his back. "Your dog's got something special," she added. I agreed. The first Christmas Buddy spent with me was the quietest I'd had in years, and the best. I didn't decorate much, just a small tree, a string of lights over the fireplace, but I did hang a stocking for him, stuffed it with treats and a new squeaky duck. He loved that duck, carried it everywhere for days, even brought it on our morning walk. Snow blanketed the neighborhood again that week. I found myself standing outside more often, coffee in hand, watching the flakes fall while Buddy roamed the yard. He didn't visit Mrs. Daly's house anymore. Not even once. But every now and then, he'd walk to the edge of the yard and look toward the trail. Like he knew someone was thinking of him out there. Like he remembered everything. It was in early January, right after the snowplows had finally cleared the last of the back roads, that something changed in Buddy's routine. He started waking me up earlier, well before sunrise. He'd sit by the bedroom door, not barking, not whining, just sitting there with a quiet kind of insistence that eventually pulled me out of bed whether I liked it or not. I'd grumble and pull on my coat, thinking maybe he needed to go out earlier than usual. But the thing was, when we stepped outside, he didn't go toward the yard. He didn't sniff around or lift his leg near the bushes like always. Instead, he stood in the driveway, facing east, ears perked, tail still. Waiting. At first, I thought it was nothing. Maybe the colder air made him restless. But by the fourth morning, I knew it was more than that. Buddy wasn't just waking me up. He was trying to lead me somewhere. So that next morning, I packed a thermos of coffee, filled a small bag with snacks for both of us, and let him guide me. He started down the sidewalk at a brisk pace. The town was still asleep. The only sound was the crunch of our steps on the leftover salt and ice. The sky was that deep blue shade that hints at dawn without delivering it. We walked for nearly 20 minutes, past the old school, the shuttered diner, the lot where the farmer's market sets up in the spring. Then Buddy veered left, down a narrow street I didn't often use. It led past the back of the library, then dipped into a residential neighborhood I barely knew. We stopped in front of a small, weathered house with blue shutters and a slanted porch. A soft light glowed in one window. Buddy sat. I looked down at him. "You know someone here?" He didn't move. I stood there a minute longer, unsure of what I was waiting for. Then the front door opened. A man stepped out. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Slender frame, brown hair cut short, wire-framed glasses that fogged slightly in the cold. He had a look on his face like he'd been expecting us. "Hi," he said. "You must be Grant." I blinked. "How do you know who I am?" He smiled faintly. "Ellen told me. I'm her nephew. Name's Travis." He walked down the steps slowly, hands in his coat pockets. Buddy stood up and met him halfway, sniffing his hand, then sitting at his feet. She said you might come by one day, Travis said, still looking at Buddy. Didn't expect it to be this soon. I was still trying to process the situation. Buddy led me here. I didn't know where we were going. Travis nodded. That tracks. He's special. He gestured toward the house. Come in, I've got coffee. Inside, the place was warm and smelled faintly of cinnamon. There were books stacked along the walls and a large, faded rug covering most of the hardwood floor. Buddy settled himself near the couch, like he'd been here before. Travis poured 2 mugs and handed me one. We sat in mismatched chairs near the window. I take it Ellen told you about Scout? He said. I nodded. Yeah, and I met Jason. I've seen the photos, the collar, the plaque at the Grove. I know the story. I just don't know how Buddy fits into it. Travis looked thoughtful. When I was a kid, Ellen used to tell me something I never forgot. She said dogs don't just live in time the way we do. She said they live in moments, in connections, and sometimes those connections are so strong they find their way back. I sipped my coffee. You believe that? I didn't. Not until a few weeks ago. He stood and walked to a side table, picked up a photo in a silver frame. He handed it to me. It was a picture of a younger Travis, maybe 10 or 11, kneeling beside a golden retriever that looked exactly like Buddy. Same gentle eyes, same thick coat. The dog was licking his face, and Travis was laughing. That was Max, he said. Scout's litter mate. My parents took one pup, and Ellen and Mark took the other. They said it would be fun to have brothers grow up with brothers. I looked up at him. He looks just like Buddy. I know. And here's the thing. Max passed away when I was 20. I buried him in my parents' backyard. Didn't get another dog after that. Couldn't. But when I saw Buddy last week, sitting at the corner of the Grove, I could have sworn... His voice trailed off. I didn't say anything. I figured maybe I was just projecting, but then Ellen called. Said she felt it too. Buddy hadn't moved. He was watching us, ears twitching at every word. He's not Scout, I said slowly. And he's not Max, but somehow he carries pieces of them. Travis nodded. That's what we think. Maybe it's not about the name, or even the past. Maybe it's about what they leave behind. I stayed another hour. We didn't talk much after that. Just drank coffee and watched the snow start to fall again. When we left, Buddy walked back the same path he came, slower this time, like he'd finished something. That weekend, the weather turned warm enough to melt some of the snow. Patches of grass peeked through, muddy and yellowed, but trying their best. Buddy spent most of the day in the backyard, lying in the sun. I watched him from the porch, thinking about everything I'd learned. That afternoon, Carol came by with a photo album. She sat with me at the kitchen table while Buddy snoozed under the window. I found these in a box in the attic, she said. Thought you might want to see them. She opened the album. The first page showed the same grove years ago. No plaque yet. Just a blanket spread out under the trees, and Scout curled up beside Jason and a much younger Carol. We used to come here all the time, she said. He'd never run off, always stayed close. Each page was like peeling back a layer of time. Scout chasing a ball. Scout sleeping in a sunbeam. Scout at the front door of Mrs. Daly's house, paw lifted like he was knocking. This one's my favorite, she said, tapping a photo of Scout sitting beside an old man in a wheelchair. That's Mr. Lawson. He lived on Pine Street. Scout used to walk with him every afternoon. Never missed a day. I ran my fingers over the photo. Buddy walks the same way, doesn't pull, matches your pace. Maybe someone taught him, she said, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. She stayed until dusk, Before she left, she looked at Buddy and said, "You keep watching over him, all right?" Buddy wagged his tail. The next few days passed quietly. Then, one morning, something new happened. Buddy didn't get up. At first, I thought he was just sleeping in, but when I knelt beside him and called his name, he opened his eyes slowly, blinked, and laid his head back down. I checked his food and water. He hadn't touched either. My heart thudded. I called the vet. They made space for us immediately. I lifted Buddy into the truck, and he didn't resist. Just laid his head on the seat and stared out the window. At the clinic, the vet, Dr. Emery, a gentle man in his 50s, examined him carefully. Drew blood. Listened to his heart. "He's older than we thought," he said. "Some dogs just age better. But something's going on. I'd like to keep him overnight, run a few more tests." Leaving him there felt wrong. The house was too quiet that night. Every creak of the floor, every rustle outside, made me look up expecting to see him there. Dr. Emery called the next morning. "It's not great," he said. "His kidneys are struggling. We're doing fluids and supplements, but there's no guarantee." I drove straight there. Buddy lifted his head when he saw me. His tail thumped once. I sat beside him for hours. I talked. About everything. The first day I saw him. The walks, the photos, the grove, the people he brought back into the light. "You did good," I told him. "Real good." He blinked, slowly, then rested his head on my hand. Dr. Emery let me take him home that night. Said being in familiar surroundings might help. "Sometimes love is better medicine than anything we've got," he said. At home, Buddy curled up by the fireplace. I laid a blanket over him, made a bed beside him on the floor, and stayed there all night. He didn't sleep much, but he didn't seem in pain either, just quiet. As dawn approached, he lifted his head and looked at the door. I followed his gaze. No sound, no knock, no reason, but I opened it anyway. The wind swept in gently. The morning sky was painted with pink and gold. Buddy stood slowly, stretched, and walked outside. I followed. He walked to the sidewalk, sat down, and waited. Buddy sat by the sidewalk for nearly 20 minutes that morning, facing the sunrise, not moving except for the occasional slow sweep of his tail. I sat beside him the whole time, on the cold concrete with my jacket pulled tight, watching the soft gold light stretch out across the street and make the rooftops glow. Cars started to pass. A jogger waved. But Buddy never looked away from the horizon, like he was waiting for something only he could feel. Eventually, he stood, shook the frost from his coat, then turned and walked back toward the house, slow and steady like he was satisfied with whatever message the morning had delivered. Inside, he drank water and sniffed at his food, but didn't eat much. I didn't push it. Just sat with him on the floor for a while, brushing out his coat and speaking in a low, steady voice, like he needed to hear more than just silence. Later that afternoon, Travis showed up. He didn't call first, just knocked gently and stepped inside when I opened the door. "Something told me to check in," he said. Buddy wagged his tail once and nosed Travis's leg. "He's still hanging in there," I said. "But he's slowing down." We sat in the living room with the fire going. Travis pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. "That's Max, about a year before he passed." The dog in the picture was thinner than Buddy, but had the same eyes, the same gentle tilt of the head. I used to take him to the lake near my place. He'd sit on the dock and watch the water like he was waiting for someone to rise up out of it. "Scout used to do the same," I said. "Carol told me he'd sit at the pond by the grove for hours." Maybe they were waiting for each other, Travis said quietly. Buddy had settled near the fireplace again, his breathing even, his head resting on the worn plush duck I'd given him at Christmas. "I've never seen a dog draw people together like this," Travis added. "It's like he remembers all of them, like he knows who they were. He never barked at anyone, never growled, he just knows," I said. Travis left after a couple of hours, promising to return in a few days. I gave him one of the photos Carol had left with me, Scout and Max together as pups. He held it for a long time before sliding it into his coat pocket. Over the next few days, Buddy's pace slowed even more. I stopped going into work. Charlie understood. "Family's family," he told me over the phone. We spent most of the time sitting outside. I'd bring a blanket and a cup of coffee. Buddy would lie beside me, eyes half closed, ears twitching at every sound. Kids on bikes waved when they passed. One morning, the mailman left a rawhide bone wrapped in brown paper on the porch. "That dog deserves a retirement gift," Frank said with a grin. I laid the bone at Buddy's feet. He sniffed it, licked it once, then gently placed his paw over it like he was claiming it for later. Ellen called. She'd heard from Travis. "I keep thinking about that bench," she said. "The plaque. I want to go back there. Sit with him." "Anytime," I told her. She arrived the next day. Dressed in a thick coat, scarf wound high, her breath visible in the cold air. Buddy perked up when he saw her, pushed himself up with effort, and walked to her. She knelt, touched his face, and whispered something I couldn't hear. He leaned into her chest. We went to the Grove together. I drove, and she sat in the back with Buddy lying across the seat, his head in her lap. When we reached the bench, the trail was quiet. No footprints in the snow except ours. She sat, Buddy at her feet, and pulled something from her coat. It was a photo, one I hadn't seen. Scout and Jason, side by side, faces pressed close, both smiling like the world had stopped just to take their picture. "He loved him so much," Ellen said softly. "When we had to leave him behind..." Jason didn't speak for 3 days. She looked at Buddy. "But I think he found his way back." We sat in silence for a long time. The trees swayed overhead. The sun filtered through the clouds in wide, gentle beams. That night, Buddy was restless. He paced the house, slow but steady, walking from room to room like he was checking each one for something. I followed him with my eyes, letting him do what he needed to do. Eventually, he settled at the foot of the stairs. I sat with him, hand resting on his back. "You keeping watch?" I asked. He blinked. That became our new rhythm. Each night he'd make his rounds. Same path, same quiet purpose. The neighbors noticed the change. Old Harris stopped by with a plate of cornbread. "For your boy," he said. "Made it without onions, just in case." Buddy sniffed it, then looked up at me. I broke off a small piece and offered it to him. He took it gently. Every few days, Carol came by. She'd sit on the porch with Buddy and hum songs I didn't recognize but which seemed to calm him. "He's still got more to do," she said once. "You can see it in his eyes. He's waiting for one more thing." I asked what she meant, but she just smiled. "Dogs know. We just try to catch up." February rolled in colder than I remembered. Ice clung to the gutters. The trees looked like they'd been dipped in glass. I worried the cold would be too much for Buddy, but he insisted on going out every morning, stubborn but gentle about it. He'd nudge the door, wag his tail, and wait. One morning, we made it to the edge of town, to a small hill that overlooked the fields beyond. Buddy sat at the top and watched the horizon for almost an hour. I sat beside him, scarf pulled high, hands in my coat. When he finally stood, I noticed something new. He limped slightly. I touched his leg. He didn't flinch, but I could feel the stiffness there. We walked back slower than usual. No rush, just the crunch of frost and the rhythm of our breaths. At home, I massaged his leg gently and covered him with a blanket. He sighed, eyes closing, and I stayed beside him until he slept. That afternoon, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper and an old photo. The note was written in clean, flowing cursive. To the one who gave him warmth in winter, thank you. Not every story gets a second chapter, but sometimes when the right person comes along, even forgotten pages can find their way back to the light. He remembers more than we know. He carries us in ways we never expected. A friend. The photo showed Scout, Max, and another retriever I didn't recognize, all lying in a field under a summer sun. I placed the letter in the drawer with the others. The box was getting full now, a history pieced together from scraps and memories. That evening, Jason called. "I've been thinking," he said. "I want to come back, spend some time with him, if that's okay." "It's more than okay," I said. "I think he's waiting for you." Jason arrived 2 days later. He brought a blanket from his childhood room. One Buddy sniffed for a long time before resting his head on it, and a small bag of toys, mostly chewed and faded. They sat together on the porch. Jason talked. Buddy listened. "He still remembers me," Jason said. "I can feel it." Maybe he never forgot. They walked the Grove Trail together the next morning. Jason said he wanted to see it one more time before heading back. When they returned, Buddy was limping a little more, but his eyes looked brighter. "Thank you," Jason said, "for everything." He left that evening. Buddy watched him drive away, tail still for a long moment. Then he turned and walked inside, climbed onto the rug near the fire, and let out a long breath. Later that night, I sat beside him. "You waiting for spring?" I asked. "Or for something else?" His ears twitched. I leaned back against the couch, hand on his back, and stared at the flicker of the fire. The house was warm, the night quiet, and Buddy, for now, was home. The next morning, Buddy didn't stir when I got up. Usually he'd lift his head at the sound of my footsteps or the clink of the coffee pot. But today, he stayed curled on his blanket, chest rising slow and steady. I crouched beside him, placed a hand gently on his side, and he opened one eye. "Still with me," I murmured. He blinked once and let his eye close again. It had been weeks since he'd eaten more than a few bites a day, but he still drank water, still stood up and walked outside every morning, still made his slow, careful rounds of the backyard. His body was slower now, but his mind seemed present. He listened, watched. Not the same as before, but still very much there. I called in again to work. Charlie didn't ask questions. "You just let me know when you're ready," he said. "You and that dog have got a lot of people pulling for you." After breakfast, I bundled up and helped Buddy outside. He took his time walking to the porch, then paused, nose raised to the wind like he was catching a scent. It was warmer than the week before, not by much, but enough that the icicles on the eaves were dripping steadily, and the snowpack was thinning. Buddy stepped carefully off the porch and made his way toward the sidewalk. I walked beside him without saying a word. I'd stopped asking where we were going a while ago. If he had somewhere in mind, I just followed. We walked slowly through the neighborhood. Buddy paused now and then, sniffing a tree trunk or resting beside a bush. We reached the corner where the small community garden sat under its blanket of snow, and there, for the first time in days, he lay down, not in fatigue, but like he wanted to be there. We sat together, listening to the meltwater trickle down the gutters, and the wind rattle the dry seed pods still clinging to the trellis. A little girl across the street waved at us from her porch. Her father called out, "That your boy?" I nodded. "Good dog," he said. "Always says hi to my daughter. She thinks he's magic." Buddy didn't react, just closed his eyes, content. Back at the house, I brushed him out and laid another blanket over his back. Then I pulled out the box of letters and photos again, sat on the floor beside him, and started organizing everything. Carol's photo album, Jason's letter, Ellen's note, even the anonymous ones. I paused on one photo, Buddy in front of Mrs. Daly's door that very first week. His fur had been muddy then, his ribs a little more visible, his eyes sharper. The change in him since then was subtle but undeniable. He was heavier now, not in weight, but in presence. He felt fuller, like every step he'd taken since then had filled him back in. Later that afternoon, I made a few phone calls, told Carol, Ellen, and Travis they were welcome to come by any time, just in case. Carol showed up that evening, a fresh pie in her hands, her eyes glassy. "I don't want to miss him," she said, and I didn't ask what she meant by that. She sat with him for over an hour, brushing his coat with the same gentle rhythm she used to hum lullabies, murmuring stories from when she was young, and Scout would pull at her shoelaces in the garden. Ellen came the next morning. Jason called later that afternoon to say he'd be on a flight the following day. I didn't know what to expect. Every morning, I'd wake up and think, maybe today is the day he decides to go. But then he'd stretch, slowly, deliberately, and get to his feet, as if to remind me he was still here. Still had something left. Buddy started sleeping more during the day, long stretches where he wouldn't stir unless I called his name. But when he woke, he was alert, present, still watching the door like he was waiting for someone to knock. Jason arrived just after sunrise the next day. He looked older since the last time I'd seen him, more tired around the eyes. But the second Buddy saw him, his tail swept once across the floor. Jason knelt beside him, whispered something I couldn't hear, and laid his head on Buddy's side. "I still remember the last walk we took," Jason said. He stopped every few steps to look back at me, like he knew we weren't going to see each other again. I cried the whole ride to Oregon. He stayed all day, helped me organize the house, clean up the yard, reframe a few of the photos. We hung one in the hallway, Buddy standing in front of the Grove's bench, the morning sun behind him like a halo. That night, Jason slept on the couch, and I stayed on the floor beside Buddy. Neither of us spoke much. The room was quiet but warm, and every so often Buddy would shift, sigh, and rest his head against my leg. The next morning he wanted to go out. We helped him up, walked him to the yard. He stood in the middle of the grass, looking toward the horizon again. The frost on the blades caught the early light, making the ground sparkle. Then he turned and walked back to the porch. I opened the door, and he walked in on his own, slower than ever, but still moving. Jason left later that day. He kissed Buddy on the head and said, "Thank you for coming back." Buddy watched him drive away without moving from his spot by the door. The days blurred after that. Every morning, we'd get up, take our slow walk around the block, and return home. Neighbors waved, some stopped to talk, a few knelt to pet Buddy. They all knew now. Knew that every moment with him was something special. Frank the mailman started leaving handwritten notes on the backs of envelopes. Little things like, "Looking good today, buddy," or "Saw you watching the sparrows, smart move." I pinned them to the fridge. Carol brought a blanket she'd knitted just for him, blue with green trim. She draped it over him like a royal cape and kissed the top of his head. "He's given us all something," she said, "whether we knew we needed it or not." Buddy lay with the blanket tucked around him, paws folded, tail flicking just once. I started keeping a journal, just a few lines a day about what Buddy did, who we saw, what stories people shared. I'd never been one to keep records of anything, but for some reason, it felt important now. He began watching the front window more often, like he was waiting for someone. I asked him once, "Who are you expecting, bud?" He looked back at me with those calm, old eyes, and I had the oddest feeling that he wasn't waiting for someone new. He was waiting for someone he'd already seen. Maybe someone I couldn't see at all. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. No name on the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper. We met him once at the Grove. Our daughter was afraid of dogs. He sat beside her without moving for nearly 10 minutes. She ended up petting him. Now she begs to visit that bench. Thank you. I added it to the drawer. That night, Buddy got up and walked the length of the house. He paused in each room, sat for a while, then moved on. When he reached the hallway with the framed photo, he stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned, walked back to the rug, and lay down. I joined him, turned off the lights, let the fire crackle. He didn't sleep immediately, just rested, eyes open, watching the shadows flicker on the ceiling. "Still here?" I whispered. "Still watching over us, huh?" He blinked. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows gently. A soft creak echoed from the porch. I got up to check, opened the front door, but saw nothing but the quiet street, the empty lawn, and the dark sky. When I came back inside, Buddy hadn't moved. But his eyes were closed now, and his breathing had softened into the slow, steady rhythm of someone who had finally drifted into rest. I sat beside him again, leaned back against the wall, and whispered, "You let me know when it's time." And I swear, even in his sleep, he wagged his tail just once. The house was so still the next morning that for a moment I thought time had stopped. The sun was just beginning to push pale light through the frost-rimmed windows, and everything inside glowed with the soft hush of early winter. I sat up slowly from the floor where I'd slept, blanket still wrapped around me. The fire now only a faint orange glow behind a wall of ash. My neck ached, my legs were stiff, but I didn't care. My eyes went straight to the rug. Buddy was still there, still breathing. Barely. I scooted closer, gently resting a hand against his back. His fur was warm, but his breathing was thin now, shallow like a whisper. He didn't open his eyes. But when I spoke his name, his ear twitched. I spent the next hour just sitting there, whispering to him about the birds at the feeder, the kids getting ready for school down the street, the weather forecast that promised an early spring. I talked about everything and nothing, keeping the silence away. Carol stopped by around 8. She didn't say a word when I opened the door, just stepped in quietly, knelt beside Buddy, and placed a small sprig of lavender next to his paw. "So he can take the smell of the garden with him," she murmured. She stayed an hour, humming softly, her hands folded in her lap. Then she kissed the top of his head, patted my shoulder, and left. Later, Ellen called. "I had a dream last night," she said. "He was lying in the field at the grove, the sun warm on his face. I woke up crying." "He's still here," I said. "I know," she replied. "But not for long." After lunch, I carried him outside in the blanket. The air was warmer than it had been in weeks. The snow was almost gone, revealing patches of yellow grass and dark, muddy earth. I set him down gently in the sunniest spot in the yard, his favorite corner by the oak tree. He blinked once, slowly, but didn't move otherwise. I sat beside him, back against the tree, arms crossed, just watching the world go on around us. A squirrel darted along the fence. A car passed on the next street over. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. I think he listened to all of it. Every sound. By late afternoon, I realized he hadn't shifted in hours. I laid a hand on his chest, still breathing, but barely. The sky had started turning gold and pink when Jason pulled into the driveway. He walked over quietly and knelt beside Buddy, not asking permission, not saying anything. "He waited for you," I said. Jason nodded, wiping his eyes. I kept hoping he would. He sat with Buddy until the sun dipped below the trees, one hand resting gently on his shoulder. Frank came by around 5, dropped off a bundle of mail and a small wooden box he'd carved himself. "For his things," he said, "when the time comes." Inside were compartments lined with felt, just big enough for his collar, maybe a toy, a few photos. I placed it near the porch and thanked him. By evening, the sky had turned that deep blue that makes you want to light a fire and put on a sweater. Jason had to leave, but he knelt one last time and whispered something to Buddy, then gave me a hug. "I'll be back soon," he said. I carried Buddy back inside, laid him on the rug, covered him gently. The fire crackled softly. I turned down all the lights and sat in the same place I had for weeks, just a few feet away, letting the warmth fill the space between us. I don't know when exactly it happened. Sometime after midnight, I reached over to stroke his back, and I knew. There was no rise, no fall, no sound. I stayed still for a long time. Hours, maybe. The fire had died down to embers by then, and the house was colder than it had been in days, but I didn't feel it. I rose quietly, wrapped him again in the blue and green blanket Carol had made, and sat beside him one last time. By sunrise, the house had started to wake. The birds at the feeder tapped against the window. A delivery truck passed down the street. And still, the silence inside held firm, respectful. I made calls, first to Dr. Emery, then to the small pet memorial service outside town. They sent someone gentle, someone who didn't speak much, just nodded with quiet understanding. They promised to return his ashes in a week. I packed a small box for him, his collar, the plush duck, a copy of the first photo I ever took of him, sitting on Mrs. Daly's doorstep, eyes alert, tail tucked tight. I placed it in the wooden box Frank had made. For a while, the house felt unbearable. Every corner was too quiet, every room too still. I kept catching myself watching the window, waiting to see him stretch on the porch or push the door open with his nose. But there was only light and dust and memory. Carol visited the next evening. She brought me soup and sat beside me on the porch. He brought us all something, she said. Something we didn't know we needed. I nodded. I couldn't talk yet. 3 days later, I received another envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photo. Buddy lying in the grove by the bench, head up, tail flicking once. It wasn't a picture I had taken, but there he was. On the back were 4 words. He made it home. The ashes arrived in a cedar box, simple and polished, with a paw print carved into the lid. I held it for a long time before I moved. Then I packed the photo, the letters, the notes, and the ashes into a canvas bag and walked the Grove Trail one last time. The bench was there, clean and dry despite the earlier rain. A single flower rested on the seat, fresh, wild, pale purple. I sat down. This was his place, I said to the trees, to the wind, to whatever had guided him all that time. I scattered the ashes beneath the bench, let the wind carry what it wanted. Then I sat in silence. It was almost dark when I got up. On the way back through town, a boy ran by on a scooter, his dog racing beside him, a golden retriever pup, all legs and floppy ears, tongue lolling out the side of his mouth. He glanced back at me, just once. Something in his eyes. Familiar. That night I returned home and found the house not quite so empty. The air still held warmth, and the rug by the fire looked as if it had just recently been vacated. I placed the wooden box back on the mantel. Then I sat beside it, pulled out the journal I'd started, and kept writing. Because some stories don't really end. They just wait for someone to listen again.